This is Mark in the Dark, shedding light on a little bit of forgotten history. Today, when victory feels like defeat. The Paris Peace Conference was supposed to end the war, to end all wars. Instead, it rearranged Europe emotionally before it rearranged it geographically. As historian Margaret Macmillan reminds us, the men in Paris were not villains, but they were improvising in the wreckage of an empire-shattering catastrophe. They redrew borders, they punished Germany under the Treaty of Versailles, they disappointed Italy, they rejected Japan's racial equality clause, they dismantled the Ottoman Empire, they built the League of Nations without the power to enforce its own authority. Barbara Tuchman once described how miscalculations and rigidity carried Europe into war in 1914. In 1919, something different happened. Not rigidity, fragility. Europe in 1919 was full of armed veterans, economic collapse, fear of revolution. Democracy existed on paper. Democratic culture did not. Italy is the first hinge. Recently, I spoke about Gabriele D'Annunzio and the rise of nationalism in post-war Europe. Italy had won the First World War, but he declared that war wasn't over. He called it the vittoria mutilata, a mutilated victory. And that phrase mattered because it makes victory seem like defeat. Defeat can be humiliating, and humiliation can be mobilized with the idea that it must be avenged. In 1922, Benito Mussolini did not storm Rome in a cinematic coup. The march on Rome was pressure, and King Victor Emmanuel III handed him power. That's the pattern. Authoritarianism is rarely seized outright. It is transferred, because elites fear instability more than they fear a strongman. They think they can manage him. They never can. Germany's path was different, but emotionally similar. The Kaiser fled. The army did not visibly collapse in Berlin. Revolution flickered in the streets. Paramilitary groups like the Free Corps filled the vacuum. Versailles became the symbol of humiliation. But as historian Adam Towles argues, the deeper crisis was legitimacy. Who lost the war? Who betrayed the nation? Who controls the streets? When democratic governments cannot answer those questions convincingly, movements that promise order will. That's when uniforms appear, symbols appear, organized discipline replaces debate. This is the origin story of the totalitarian state in the 20th century. Not because Versailles mechanically caused fascism, but because the conference failed to stabilize the emotional landscape of Europe. The winners were insecure, the losers humiliated, the economy is unstable, the institutions brittle. As political theorist Hannah Arendt later observed, totalitarian movements grow where mass frustration meets weak institutions. Anger, when it cannot be absorbed, reorganizes. It looks for strength. It looks for myth. It looks for someone who says, I alone can fix it. From 1914 to 1945, Europe fights what can only be described as a second 30 Years' War. The German wars of the 20th century. 20 million dead in part one, 75 million in part two. The hinge was not simple defeat. It was humiliation without reconciliation, instability without legitimacy, peace without trust. When victory feels like defeat, politics radicalizes. And when the government and institutions cannot contain the rage they've created, well, history does not repeat. It looks for a uniform. This is Mark in the Dark. We don't look at the past to rehearse outrage. We look at it to reorganize the hinge. Because the atmosphere always matters, and someone will always step into that vacuum. The only question is, who?